Hi, welcome to our monthly edition, actually the April edition of our Education Technology Leaders Webcast. I'm David Couch with the Kentucky Department of Education, and we are here at Magoffin County High School, brand new high school, first year of the high school. I've been driving by this for a couple of years. It's nice to see that it's finished and looks fantastic. This is our way to get two-way feedback from districts. So we have our Go Soapbox is up in operation. We have three questions that we would like for you to respond to, and they're open now, but obviously we take any kind of comments, and we should have a lot today of questions either for our host district or for us in the variety of topics that we have. From the Department of Education, I'm joined by Dee Dee Connor, who's our Chief Data Officer, and Bob Hackworth with Security. Mike Lettingham leads our planning and project management. Harold Burchell is here representing Region 8, and you got some of your districts here too in the audience. We have live studio audience, so they can give live feedback during it as well. We also have the host district. Superintendent Heldon, I'll let you introduce your team and give a little bit of background on the district.
Okay. I'm Scott Heldon, Superintendent of Magoffin County. I have with me Jeff Salyer. He's our main guru with the technology in Magoffin County. I have some of my central office staff here with us, and we have some of our school personnel along with some other districts.
So you span over there. Who you have from your central office?
I have our special ed coordinator, Ronna Francis. I have our assessment coordinator, Jacqueline Howard, and I have our curriculum and numerous other hats, Angie Skaggs, with us today. And our DPP was here, Mr. Watson, but he'll be back in a few minutes. A little bit about our district. As we were talking earlier, this is our first year in the new high school. Magoffin County is we're kind of transitioning back to a traditional setting. We spent a number of years where we experienced the tornado that we lost our middle school and damaged one of our elementaries and damaged a little bit of the high school. We went through about a year there that we had to shuffle around and get the grade school fixed and ready back. And so, but our middle school students and high school students were combined in one building in the old high school for about 4 years. This past year, we were able to separate, move into this new facility that's an outstanding facility that I can be proud of and that everyone else should be proud of. Our middle school students moved into our old high school, which we had just renovated a few years prior to the tornado, so they were able to occupy that, and we're going through this year of adjusting, and we've got a new principal at the high school this year. Mr. Skaggs retired at the end of last year, so it was a whole new start here in this building, and I came on at the beginning of July, so it's new for us all. But I've been in the district 28 years prior to this year. I've had various roles. I served as teacher, elementary principal, middle school principal, worked at central office, federal programs, preschool programs. I've had a maintenance department. And I've had an opportunity to work with Jeff closely in the various roles, and I can't brag enough about Jeff and Jason. We talked earlier that we're shorthanded when it comes to personnel when we deal with technology, but these gentlemen try to do the best they can. And we're like a lot of districts in eastern Kentucky. We're struggling right now to try to keep our students, maintain that population. With the loss of coal jobs in eastern Kentucky, it's been a hardship on a lot of districts, and especially Magoffin County. We're trying to overcome that. And if you came in today, you saw the construction on the Mountain Parkway that's taking place outside, literally outside of the parking lot. But we're hoping and praying that expansion will allow us access and allow more of an avenue for businesses and things to see that we have great things to offer, and I'm confident that our schools and our personnel that we have here in Magoffin County will meet the standards. We've got some great people here, and I've got some great members in the community that support our schools, and I'm very proud. I'd like to thank our mayor, Pete Shepard. He's here today. I want to welcome him, and John Blanton, our state representative. He's actually from Magoffin County, and I'm thankful that he's here. But once again, we'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for coming today.
Thanks. Well, Representative Blanton, I'll talk with you first. I know we were talking ahead of time, and seems like I probably played against your brother in high school.
Yes.
And you played against my brother in high school. Hope there's no hard feelings about any
No,
of that.
sir.
We're still all good?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And I know you're a brand new state representative.
Yes, sir.
And we really appreciate, as we do any webcast that we do, to have the superintendent and the representatives there, because it really is important for our EdTech leaders to understand and things from your all's perspective. And obviously we're going to hit on a couple of topics around funding and positions, and feel free to interject in that, because as we're planning for the next upcoming session. But I'll give you a chance to say a few words if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Couch and Mr. Helton, for inviting me and allowing me to be here today with you all during this webcast. This is a very important opportunity to come together, talk about technology. Look, we can't go wrong, and we must invest in the greatest asset we have in our future, and that's our children. And in order for our children to be successful in the future, technology has to be a main part of their education. And so I applaud you all for what you're doing and for the efforts that are taking place here in Magoffin County. They have a great technical support group with Mr. Salyer and his limited staff now.
Yes.
But nevertheless, they do an outstanding job. And I know from, I guess, indirect personal experiences, my wife's a school teacher here in the system, so I hear a lot about having to call Jeff for this and Jeff for that. So, but I thank you all for allowing me to be here today.
Oh, thank you, and please feel free to speak up anywhere we're talking during the webcast, because we're always interested in your all's perspective.
Thank you,
Jeff. You've been here for a while. Different roles.
I'm seasoned. I've been around. Yep, seen it all. Had the opportunity to experience. Kind of grow from the beginning of when STI was implemented. That's kind of the way my job got created, was due to STI. And of course now we're in Infinite Campus, but knowing what I know now, looking back, I'm not sure I could step back into this role being as green it was at that time.
Yeah.
But I enjoy my job. There hasn't been a day that I've said I don't want to go in. So it got a few more years left. Probably hang it up when I can. Want to do something else, just because of the experiences and what I've been able to learn on the job. Been able to work with some great people. Had a lot of good bosses. Made a lot of good friends. Just really enjoy what I do.
And when the housing market, we talked about the positions, because I think this is a good example of what's happened, just not here but across the state. When the housing market crash happened in 2008, 2010, we saw the CATS baseline for the very first time reduced from 19.5, what it was in 1992, down to the 16.4 that it is. And that's part of our discussion. But during the last webcast, I talked about the human capital side of technology, and I gave the analogy of the baseball team. Of you have 9 players, you're supposed to have 9 players, but you're playing with 2 positions, and everyone's fussing about, well, why didn't the third baseman get that ball? Why didn't the right fielder get it when you don't have positions there? But you used to have 9 positions.
We did.
Yeah.
We had 9 paid positions in technology at one time. Things ran really smooth then.
Yeah.
We were really strong. Things happened though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it happened. We see it across other districts too. And the dynamic that we talked about the last webcast is, but we're still seeing this explosion of the types of technology being bought, being just not computers, but everything being automated, from heating, air conditioning systems, security systems, and either a flattening or reduction in that staff and the challenges. So we're going to talk about the money aspect of it. But you've really lived from going from a full baseball team to a pitcher and a catcher now.
It's definitely different. We've had to change the way we do things. We depend on people doing a lot of things for free that they were normally paid for. We've got a good staff. Our assessment, our curriculum, they all kind of pick up on some of that where the technology portion was always funded through the technology program. Mr. Helton's found ways to be creative and using funds that that's not normally used in technology, but he's been able to throw some money our way and just being efficient. When you're doing something, you can't waste time. You've got to do it right the first time. We've got, our schools have got some seasoned staff there as well that they know how things work. They know how we want things to work. So We do okay.
Right.
I'm not going to complain. Don't get me wrong. I would love to be back to that 9-page staff, but I'm proud of my district.
And what he said there about being efficient, he came up through the time in the district, and I was here as well, and we had a lot of funding. And you get kind of the word, I guess, is spoiled when you can go out and you can do what you need to do.
Yeah.
So it's been a real adjustment for us and our staff to understand that when you say we can't afford that, and in years past it wasn't that case, and it's hard for them to, and I'm not saying, I guess I shouldn't say hard, but it's been difficult for them to understand that this is reality now, but why we had it then. And it's not really anything that anyone done here. It's just a matter that our situation's changed. So we've got to be more efficient, conservative, and put our funding where the need is the most.
And it may require actually a strategy, Justin, because part of this educational effort that we're doing with superintendents and legislators that we're trying to do, if the funding issue is not addressed, then here's what you should expect. You can't be as responsive as you once were when you had none.
Right.
And you may not be able to maximize that investment in your classroom because you don't have folks, the technology integration specialists working one-on-one with the teachers on how to maximize it. So it's that adjustment, but also maybe you don't need to go to one-to-one, because if you're not doing the people side of it.
It's strange that you've mentioned that, because that is one of the reasons we haven't. That is just due to the technical staff and being able to support that, because from my experience, we've thrown some things out there that failed, and it was due to lack of support. And I'm not at this moment. I'm not a proponent in our district of one-to-one, because it would fail, because we just could not support it at this moment.
People So that's part of the educational effort that we're doing. I met with a subgroup of superintendents at the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and for those that watched last month's webcast, I went over our human capital study, the highlights of that. And overwhelmingly, the superintendent said, you need to educate everybody on this. It would be very helpful. We just did not realize. And so part of it is just educating folks and making them aware of it and hoping something can be done. But if it's not, at least understanding the consequences of that no one's trying to do that. So this is part of that effort, part of the discussion. I do know we had our STLP state championship, what I'll talk about a little bit later on. And unfortunately, it fell on the same day as the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative's FIRE ARI initiative, Appalachia Resonance Initiative. The Renaissance Initiative, yes, thank you.
It was great.
Yeah. And I know you had students involved with that, right?
We had a lot of students from our elementary to our high school and teachers as well, and some of the people that are here with us today were present at that meeting up there, that showcase that they had, and our kids did an excellent job, and it was a nice experience. They had kids from all over Eastern Kentucky, the districts that are a member of the co-op, doing presentations, and a lot of technology was on display. It was a great way for our kids to showcase not only their technology, but I thought it was great. Our high school and middle school band got to perform, and it was just a showcase, if you would say. But one of the most interesting things that our students got to look at was the tiny houses that they had outside. Some of the districts around had gotten a grant to build some tiny homes, and they had them up for auction, and they were letting the students and people tour those. So our kids got to experience it. But I was well pleased with what I saw, not only from our staff and students of Magoffin County, but just overall in Eastern Kentucky.
And just so you know, one of our soapbox questions that we ask you to respond to is we're trying to make sure those things don't fall on the same date next year.
Yeah,
so
that'd be great.
Because the STLP state championship, we had close to 14,000 people there last week, but it fell on the exact same day as it. We had two great technology things going on, and so Jeff Hawkins, who's fantastic to work with, the executive director at KVAC, immediately got with us to say, what is the dates for next year? So we're going to make sure those two do not fall right on top of each other. So help us out as you're taking a look at this. Which dates you would propose that we have the state championship next year, and think about the entire school calendar of which would work out best. So we like your input of that, and we'll show that results here in just a little bit. Jeff, from you, we get feedback from all the CIOs and EdTech leaders every year. I was looking at some of yours that you provided. You said STLP rocks. So I think you see that STLP is a powerful program. And actually, Magoffin County used to have the shining star of STLP here at this district. So I know there's interest in trying to reestablish that. There's two aspects of it, is the project-based learning that the students get, but also there's the technical support side. And actually in Belfry High School that I saw, their students, part of their help desk structure is helping teachers, going work with teachers on how to maximize technology and instruction. So they're playing some of the digital learning coach role. We also know some of the help desk help out with break fix. So one of the questions we have with Go Soapbox today is, how many of you currently have a student help desk that you're using across the state, and how many plan to have a student help desk? It's within that. I know you're trying to get that back on the radar screen here. You recognize the plus side. What was your experience? Did you part of it before you saw what it was? And I think you did too, right?
Yeah. I was principal when it was
Right.
at its heyday.
Yeah,
It was great.
yeah. And one of the models I really liked here and Jeff Sabulski, who leads that for us at the state level, I saw here, is you had a young man. Who was that young man?
We actually had two.
Okay.
Neil Arnett and Matt Bailey.
Yeah.
Neil is now he is a co-CIO DTC for Pikeville.
Yeah.
We started out together working late hours. We revamped our network. Of course they couldn't come to work till after school.
Yeah.
And I was a young married guy, no kids, no responsibility, so we could stay late, and we learned together. And now he's there and does a great job there.
What impressed me is Neil ran it.
Yes.
I mean, I came to your showcase event, which was massive, and he was the person, really was, and I know there was adults behind the scene, but he was the one announcing everything, and I've told Jeff Sabulski, that's the model that I have in mind. I know we had, for the first time, our state championship, a student-led initiative and more speaking up there. That's what I want to move toward, because I know what it can do, and obviously Neil's, you could see his great potential in that role, and he's done, moved on and really doing some great things here. So part of our effort will be traveling the state, also on the human resource side, to educate superintendents on adding that to the toolbox. I know we had one superintendent that came from Western Kentucky, southern Western Kentucky, and was not aware that this was a possibility to help them out with the people shortage that they have there. And so it was both the project-based learning side, which is fantastic, but it's also the people side, the win-win that you can get by having students that are involved in that exercise. So you'll see me try to get that going on a radio stream. I know it doesn't always work. You do have to have adults somewhere in the mix, by the way. I know Neil did a great job, but as an 18-year-old, I need adult supervision. A lot of people say I still do. But somewhere they got to be giving guidance to the students. You have to have them somewhere in the mix. But you get a 5-to-1 to 10-to-1, bang for the buck when you invest in that. Yeah. So I know you've seen what it is. The other part here, Mike, I'd like for you to comment on that you talked about is technology activity report. This is something that comes from the financial management system, Munis, that a report of the technology spending of the district. And you had some words of advice for us on that.
Well, I just feel that a lot of that direction for the TAR report needs to come from the finance end. When it comes from my side, I don't think they realize the importance of that report, what it means to the state, the information that is gathered in that. I just feel if the direction came through from their superiors, that it would be more important. It'd be more on time, timely. I think the data. We talk about being a data steward. I think the data would even be more accurate.
Yeah.
I think it's a win-win if it would, and and that's a financial report. And that's finances. So, I need to be a part of it, need to be aware of it, need to know, we need to obviously work together on that. I just feel that would make your report more accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just to speak to it a little bit, that absolutely is in line with one of the top items that came out of the kind of review and assessment that we done over the course of December, January, February timeline. We had a team that met with several districts to go specifically over the technology activity report to review kind of how that's been going on, what does it need to be, what are the adjustments and changes we need to make. And I would say probably the number one thing was a better alignment of this being a shared responsibility between the technology group and the finance group. And so from the department level, that commitment occurred prior to us even starting that activity, was that our office, along with our finance office, would work more hand in hand with what we do with the technology activity report. It will be a part of regular trainings and activities that go on both from the technology side as well as the finance side. An example of that is CASBO coming up. We'll be presenting at that, talking about the technology activity report, which will be targeted more toward finance officers, obviously than technology folks at that particular activity. So that, again, is right in alignment with something that needs to happen. And it really has to start at the department level, and I know that commitment's there. I think that if we look back in the history of it, we kind of had a time period where that worked a little bit better, then it kind of, fell apart a little bit as far as how strong we were working together on that. And that's very much so an indication.
That relationship needs to be definitely made stronger.
Yeah. So I think everybody will see that. What we developed out of that work, and I think I spoke to this at the last webcast or the one before, is basically an action plan, some things to do. That's, again, one of the top things was to have a better commitment between the finance department and the technology department on this being a shared effort as far as what we're doing with it. We're going to have a more specific game plan for how we do regular updates and trainings about the importance of it. The tips and tricks about how to do some things that, some folks, like some of the recurring cost kind of things, and how do you make sure that's getting captured as part of the technology activity report, so that at the end of when it comes time to do the report, you don't have to manually go in and plug stuff in. And then some minor adjustments to the commodity codes. We certainly are not going to increase the commodity codes back up to a big number that it once was, but there may be one or two added, and then some adjustments on what those are. Just some examples of some of the things going to be happening. So absolutely, what your comment is right in line with one of the things that was a common theme with everybody we talked with.
One of the things, Jeff, I'm going to ask you some more technical ones in the more technical part of it here, but we talked about efficiency. Sometimes when you have reduction in funding, it causes you to get more efficient. And it reaches a limit, you become efficient as you can. But I know you talked about, I'd like for you to talk about your movement to the cloud for your storage.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've always been a district that, when that was one of the first things I did when I took this job was implemented home directories, local storage. I always stress to my staff, store everything on your local storage. If something happens, we have backups and all that. But now teachers have got to where they want to, and students, they want to do stuff at home. They want to do stuff on their phone. They want to be able to, be watching a UK ball game and interrupt and pull up, a document and show somebody. And I've actually had that happen. With Google Drive and OneDrive and just, the efficiency of the cost, being free, has really directed us to, to encourage our staff to use it. And it's been really a win-win for us. Nothing but positive. It's caused our internet usage to go up, which if you check our bandwidth, you'll see that.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing. Students are often coming to me, and I get a personal relationship with a lot of kids because I help coach basketball, and I'm in the schools a lot, and they'll ask me questions about Google Drive and OneDrive, and that really makes me feel good when I see that happening. Plus, it goes again to the finances. Right now we're running servers that's going on 6 years old. And as far as the dependability, and it's just another way to be efficient.
Yeah. Yep. I'd like to move on some of the state things, but I'll circle back to you. I'm going to ask some questions as we hit on those topics. I sent out a note to everyone about Naomi Cornett. She suddenly passed away a few weeks ago. Naomi is part of our team at the Department of Education and one of my employees who was outstanding. And then she moved on to Owen County Schools, and it was outstanding. Chief Information Officer, Education Technology for many years to that school district, and all the things he did for STLP2 were fantastic. So I wanted to give you all an opportunity to go soapbox, to share some of your thoughts that others would see, that you want to see. Just some thoughts about Naomi, those that are newer, It's just so unfortunate. You know, she was enjoying retirement. She had enjoyed it for a year or two, and she was taking full advantage of it. But she passed away way too soon. And you know, I saw some folks at the visitation, some of the EdTech leaders from that area, and part of our staff went as well. It was good to see you and celebrate her life there. So I want to give you all an opportunity to go soapbox to share some of your thoughts about Naomi as well. She will be missed in a lot of different ways. Next topic I want to talk to you about is the easement rights and the Kentucky K-12 high-speed network of internet access. So we had this happen here in East Kentucky just a little bit, where we had some of the Kentucky Wired contractors and reps were showing up at a district and say, we're here to put the connection of Kentucky Wired into the school district. And so we had to educate them on, you know, that's not appropriate at this time. And that died down for the most part. It wasn't an overwhelming type of thing. It seemed like they came to 3 or 4 districts, and once they were educated on it, everybody was good. As Kentucky Wired has moved to central and a little bit of western Kentucky, they have new people, they have new representatives, new contractors there, and we're running into some of the same things. It's not like a 100% kind of thing, more of a 5 or 10% type of thing out there. So it's our intention to send out communication to superintendents, and I'm also working with the Kentucky Wired team on a communication they can send to their staff. Obviously, and Representative Blank, we'll have you talk about from a home access point of view. You know, it's important that Kentucky Wired it is successful in a lot of different aspects. From the K-12 perspective, the student home access and increasing the ability for both the affordability and the availability of high-speed access to our students' homes. But we've already gone through a competitive bid process for our high-speed network. Kentucky was the first state in the nation to have high-speed to every school, and then fiber to every school. We did that in the mid-'90s and in the 2000s. So it's already in place. Most Kentuckians, like 95% Kentuckians, probably aren't aware that Kentucky is the national leader as far as connectivity to our schools. It just came out in a magazine article about that. But so when and the way our E-rate program works is all you know, that brings in about $9 million of state dollars to the state on our high-speed access, which we turn around and give to districts an offer of assistance, is it has to go through a competitive process that's E-rate eligible. So the current KH3, the Kentucky Information Highway contract, version 3 of that is E-rate eligible. The current Kentucky Wire contract is not, and they would have to go through a competitive process and see the results of that. Our current bid that we have, the current contract we have, can last up to 2023. It was bid in 2013 and awarded. And if you look at the previous history of that, KH1 and KH2, we used the full 10 years of that before doing a rebid. It's not saying that we have to wait the entire 2023, but that just kind of throws the date out there. So what we'll spend some time doing is educating folks on just the easement rights, and that came up. So we had an example of a district to where someone on the field didn't realize that K-12 schools were not part of the initial implementation of Kentucky Wired. And so they gave the district a diagram that showed the line coming straight into the district office and trying to get easement rights for it. So that's obviously got pushback from the district. And but we also had an example where Kentucky Wired was trying to run a line along the border to complete their middle mile network so some last mile could connect to that. Now that is very appropriate. We don't want them to go 20 miles out of the way when going along a district border would allow a faster completion and connection to the last mile providers that are out there. You have to go through with every easement right. You have to go through, and this is a reminder, I thought everyone just would recognize this after a period of time. The Department of Education has to approve any easement rights that you have. So make sure all those are coming up for the department for approval. That's regardless of Kentucky Wired or whatever you may have, water going by there, and anything requires that. And there's a price that you can charge, should charge, for those easement rights to the providers. And so you'll see that in the communication out there. But once again, let me circle back to the home access piece that we have. Is our digital readiness survey that we send out every year tries to find out what is the level of home access you have in the community. I think, Jeff, you estimated about 80% have high speed, 20% don't. That's great for that 80%, not great for the other 20%. So what can we do to up the odds of providing it and then at affordable rates. And so you step in with Kentucky Wired and Representative Blank. I know you're involved with some communities. They're actually going through the process now, trying to find that last mile, because I don't think folks understand. Really, Kentucky Wired is a middle mile network.
Right.
It still counts on someone locally putting in that last mile to the home.
Sure, absolutely. The city of Pikeville in particular, they are working on a bid process, finding that proper fit of that company that has the expertise and the skill to be able to run that last mile. And there's some challenges in that. Obviously, when you look at commercial buildings or you look at government buildings, those get charged at a higher rate than the homeowners do. And so being able to run that wire to these individual households and keeping the price down at a point where people can afford to have that access to that high-speed broadband, that is a challenge. But they are being successful up there. It's moving along very well. We also here in this county, we have Foothills that's working to see to it that broadband is available throughout this area. Sometimes there's challenges that are simply has to do with location. When you run a mile of the broadband, it costs as much for that company to run that mile if there's 2 houses on it as it does if there's 200 houses on it. So all those figures in rates, and what we're trying to do is get this last mile in to where homes can have access, but at a rate that's affordable. And when that occurs and we begin to see the high-speed internets that are out there today, broadband is a broad term anymore because it's dependent upon the speed you have. Right. And so it opens up so many doors for students. I can foresee the time when we no longer have a need for snow days in Kentucky, that they can do instructional time on the days it's snowing if we get access to all of our students. But I also see, and we already see this, with a high enough access speed, people's going to be working from home for companies that aren't even located in this country. Right. And they're going to be able to do it because they have that last mile access right. into their homes. And Pikeville's been innovative in that. Foothills, Thacker Grigsby's, Gearhart Communications, they're trying to get Eastern Kentucky on that map of having access in that last mile to our homes.
My mom still lives in Johnson County. I grew up there, but we have a family farm in Breathitt County right beside Rusall Elementary, and the only way you can get there is satellite. And I got to tell you, it's very expensive. It's unreliable. It's a stopgap type of thing, and it is a challenge. Who will run that last mile to those mountains in Breathitt County, and what kind of pressure can be brought to bear for that last mile? So I do think that's a confusion for folks with Kentucky Wire that it's going straight to the home. It is not. But it's counting still on local providers doing that piece. So it's going to take a full court press on some communities to get those, some local providers to put a piece in there so they can connect in.
Right. And Kentucky Wired is essentially your main trunk that's going to run east to west across Kentucky, and then it's left up to local areas to make that connection into the main trunk.
And I think the other piece, we were at Russell County last month, and Russell County has already put a good number of that fiber throughout the community. Johnson County already has a good amount of that. They had to complete it at Russell. So even if you have it available, another piece of this is it affordable. And one of the things we talked about, Mike, in the last webcast, that at the FCC level that they're proposing, one of the proposals is to remove the Lifeline program. And this was for low-income families. So part of it we're trying to do, as they've asked states to do, is talk to folks at the FCC of the importance. And it really does run into folks in high poverty areas. That is a lifeline for those families, whether it's wired or wireless access, to help them out. If it's sitting right at their house, how frustrating would that be, and they can't afford it.
Right.
So I do think that's another piece of this that we hope remains as part of the FCC program, is that discount program. But I just wanted folks aware that's right now on the chopping block, I believe. Is that right, Mike?
That's right.
Yeah.
And we don't really have any more information other than that. We know that it is something that's being discussed about whether that continues or not. And of course, we're going to always argue for any kind of programs that can remain available to help with that to remain available.
So I wanted to pause here. Are there any kind of questions that have bubbled up that I need? Is this a good stopping point to address from them? Okay. So let's talk about the Student Technology Leadership Program State Championship. I sent out an email to all CIOs talking about the success of that. We've had a 40% increase in the amount of students participating in STLP over the past 2 years. 40% increase. And I can just see that continuing to explode upward. And we had our all-time record state championship crowd of 14,000 people at Rupp Arena last week. Not for a basketball game. They were there for an academic state championship. The kind of student projects were just fantastic. I remember I was at a presentation yesterday at Kentucky Digital Summit. So there's a guy there that talked about how he can solve the Rubik's Cube in X amount of seconds. So I saw students develop, middle school students had developed a robot that solved the Rubik's Cube. So your role as the human was trying to mess it up as fast as you could, as much as you could. You set it in the robot, and it does a scan. It will tell you how many moves it's going to take to solve it, and you watch it do it within 20 or 30 seconds. So you had middle school students that are doing that kind of work, and you can see that all over the competition. So you'll see in this discussion, it is important for you as districts to get your superintendents there, to get your legislators there. One of the folks talked about when their legislators saw that STLP state championship, they go, I get it. I get, just not STLP, I get why technology is important in instruction. Because these aren't just pure technical projects. Probably 95% of the projects these students do are doing something to help their fellow students learn, help their teachers in the teaching process, or help the community. That's 95% of them. 5% of them are pure technical projects. So it's part of a learning atmosphere for them. So it's project-based learning in action. And even for a large group of teachers to see project-based learning in action is powerful. So it is a big part of our strategy for your regional events that we have typically on university campuses. I know we have the expo area here. The regional events, try to get your legislators and superintendents there. And then at the state championship, the same kind of effort, because it shows why we're trying to do all this in action. And we'll talk a lot about the feedback that we receive back. But I also want to thank all the volunteers. This thing where we had 14,000 people, we have a staff of one that leads it. He's one paid position leads all that. The rest of it counts on volunteers. And volunteers in districts, also even positions in districts. We have the STLP leaders and mentors and champions that are in districts. So those are the adults that are leading the program, which we always want to give high fives to. But also at the state level, we have our own KD staff that's involved with that. We have university volunteers. We have corporations that are volunteering their time to lead different events. And we want to once again thank all those volunteers that made that special, very special thing happen going forward. I think I'd like to now see the Go Soapbox results if we could. I think it's probably the appropriate spot to do that. Okay, so Jeff Sobolski, who leads that effort, this is some of your input. Too far away. But the issue with this is we have to plan way in advance. When you're trying to get Rupp Arena or any of these big venues, you can't wait right before it. You got to lock in these times. So I hope not only do you identify an event here, you talk about on Go Soapbox why one doesn't work well for you all, just in the timing. Think of everything that's going on with students. How, what timing is one of these times really a bad time for
And what you're saying, David, is if there's a significant activity occurring, make sure that we get that captured.
Yep. Yep.
Spring breaks are usually in April, but I don't know where the 28th falls on. That's really close to spring break time.
Yeah.
This current testing one is May 3rd, so that May 2nd's getting
Close to 10.
yeah.
And we all know there's never a good time for anything, perfect time when you're trying to do this kind of stuff. Let's go on to the next one that we had. I think this was regards to the help desk, right? As if you have a help desk, you're planning on putting a help desk in a student-run help desk. Not yet. So just a heads up to all of you, I will be going full court press, using another basketball analogy. I appreciate Jim Blanton on superintendents, on trying to make sure they're aware of this possible tool in the toolbox, and from your perspective that it's just not just something you got to take on too.
Right.
Maybe this is another person part-time, they're leading it. So I know with some initiatives people say, well, that's just adding on top of me. So I'll work, make sure they understand it really does require, if someone's already overloaded, you can't overload them again, right? And have another full-time job. So I just want to give you a heads up, because I do think that's a win-win. And once again, Belfry High School, that was so impressive to see what they're doing. And I just for those that are in charge of leading that, it's not just a break fix. They really have a nice strategy of trying to, in the absence of having digital learning coaches, of the adults and teachers, which you'd like to have, them going and working with the teachers, I think is just fantastic. And you said they can do it. These are older kids, and even the younger ones can do it as well. So let's go to the next topic, and this one has to do with one of the topics we talked about at the CIO Summit. We had close to 80% of 173 districts that were there, that registered, and for one thing or another, as last minute, whatever, I think we had like 5% of that 80% that couldn't make it. So what I'm giving you is the results of a pretty good portion. 75% of the CIOs said this is their feedback that they gave. And for those that didn't watch the last webcast or weren't at the summit, is we talked about the results of the human capital part of that. What is the staffing? What is the roster you need? We said you need 9 players, you need 8 players on your baseball team. So I use that, and I use the Lucy analogy. If you have not seen the Lucy kind of thing, do a Google, Lucille Ball and Chocolate Factory, and you'll see that's what's happened to a lot of the technicians across the state. But closely related to that topic is money, the money aspect of what it takes to fund that. So we talk about the need of positions, but also if that's true and we're not going to lower the number of end devices that are being bought and start taking them out, then we got to address the people side of it, or lower our expectations of response time of folks, technicians, and also that we're maximizing that investment. So I gave, as an introduction to this, as I do the summit, I talk about 5 minutes and listen for about 50, which is probably always should be appropriate in those kind of settings. But this is the feedback that you all gave, and I'm going to give you. I'm not going to go through all of it. There's 21 tables, but I think it's worth, and you can get some of the themes that come up over and over again. And the question was, what's the techniques that we should do for the next session? That's in 2018, legislative session, which is a funding session, to make the best case that we can of raising the baseline, the Kentucky Education Technology System, KETS baseline, back up to its original allocation of 1992 of 19.5. Currently it's 16.4 million. So what's all the techniques that got to make that happen? Also reminding folks that we had an increase of 70% consumption in Kentucky K-12, the internet, the past 12 months. 70% increase in consumption. I don't suspect that's going downward. I suspect that's going upward. You just added that with your drives, right? Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So, and we're seeing as folks are moving to it, as they're moving to one-to-one, which it is across the state. But hopefully they're addressing the staffing piece, Jeff, as they're doing that. Is we're seeing the demand on the network, but we're also closely related to that are the positions. So we're talking about what can we do to make the best case to get an increase, because part of that money could be used for increasing number of technicians in the district, the digital learning coaches within an organization. I also, part of this introduction, I talked about listing computers as number one. I do not think is a good strategy. And the reason for that is, for the most part, we're seeing districts are finding a way through a variety of other funding sources to buy the end device. Now, you'll see the comments that come from your peers across the state. Most superintendents and local boards don't understand everything else that goes on behind the scenes. So they're able to find the money to buy the end device, but they're not funding for all the other components that they need to. And there's a people side and there's a technical side, which I'm sure you're aware of. And what role can we all do to lay out something in a simple form, a one-pager for superintendents and legislators and local boards, of here's all the components of that. But I do think there's nothing that prohibits you if we raise the baseline. There would be nothing that would prohibit you from using, part of that that increase of your offer to buy end devices. But I just know two things is districts have found a way. The numbers tell us that. We can see it's gotten better and better over the past 10 years, the number of end devices coming in schools. The other thing is that we did, I guess close to 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, we bonded to get computers. Now, I personally think there's not much of an appetite from the legislators I've interacted with to bond for 10 years for devices that go end of life in 5 years. And that's what happened the last time, and that's what ended that. And bonding in general for that purpose for something is a tough sell. So I think those two in combined, I know folks like that. You kind of got like the gift card before back in 2006. It couldn't be spent on anything else besides in devices, and there was a great lot, people really like that. But I really don't see that happening. But through this is actually you could spend part of it, but the major emphasis I think that will connect, and you all can tell me I'm wrong. We have legislator and superintendent here that I think will connect with those groups is an increased funding for internet usage, and to fund certain positions that need to fill the ball team. We need a third baseman, we need a right fielder, a center fielder, at least for our baseball team, to be somewhat competitive going forward. So with that background, I'm going to read off some of the comments. I'm not going to tell you who said them. I'm just going to tell you the table that said them. These did not come from Jeff, by the way, but Jeff's probably not going to be too resistant what I'm getting ready to say. So just want to give you a heads up. So this is Table 1, some of the key comments from Table 1. And actually, I think this involves you, Representative Blanton, because I think you actually visited a district. So one of the ones that highlight how education technology helps students become college and career ready, invite legislators to the schools and classrooms without, so they can see the latest stuff or without the latest stuff, how they're maximizing it. So my understanding is you went to Knott County.
That's correct.
And our CIO Hoover and Superintendent King brought you in their school. Yeah. Oh, she's here.
And they're here.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Talking about you. Both the schools here. So, love that technique. Love that technique.
As did I. It was a very informative day for me to go visit with them, see what they're doing in the classroom, see how they're thinking outside the box, and the approach to educating the students with technology. And to be very honest with you, I was somewhat blown away at how successful and the style they were using. I mean, it was great to go there and have that opportunity. And I learned so much from that, and the importance of having those different learning environments, having those particular students doing particular activities with, whether it be with iPads or computers or whatever the device may be. So it was great, and I highly recommend that all of our legislators get the opportunity to go out and to visit with the local school districts and just see what's going on. I think they would be surprised.
So we're going to count on you to tell some of your fellow legislators that.
Absolutely.
We got some stuff to work at our end.
Sure.
Obviously. So, and this is important to say is I know everyone says I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I just want to do this, but it matters.
Absolutely.
It matters. Those little things matter a lot of just bringing them in, letting them see it, and the plus and minus of it, obviously, both sides of it, so they can make an educated decision when it comes time to make that educated decision. But if you're not giving that at bat, you're not seeing it. And so it left an impression.
Absolutely.
Right? Positive impression.
Absolutely.
So it's helpful. So it's words of wisdom for everyone else that's watching here in the technique, and that's why we push it so hard. The other one is take advantage of STLP events to show off to the community. Host an STLP night at schools. Community will buy into that. So there was a lot around the STLP. And I know we made a big effort this year for the schools that were part of STLP competing in our state championship, writing a letter that sending it to the district and that they could send to their local legislator to try to get them there. Like I said, there's a comment here that legislator getting to that state championship has made a huge difference on their perception of technology in that district and in Kentucky schools. Priority must be made at the commissioner level. They're talking about our commissioner level. He's popular with superintendents right now. Making EdTech a priority would influence superintendents who would influence communities who would influence legislators. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right.
You don't have to agree with what I say. But I do know from us, it just, for that aspect is, obviously I need to make sure that I'll educate, Commissioner Pruitt, which I will go, you can guarantee I will go full court press on every opportunity I have with him. And also, I present to our state board in June the technology plan, unmet need and expenditure plan. And you can count that I will bring this up to our board in every different aspect, constantly. They'll hear it just not once from me, they'll hear this over and over and over again. But so if there is an impact, if we do not get the funding, I'll tell them what happens if we don't. And so when it happens, they've got a heads up to it going forward.
And you asked me, but the commission, being a new superintendent, I will say this: the commissioner's very accessible. He's easy to talk with.
Yeah. And he is from our point too. This is someone in the Department of Education. And I do think he is really connected with the classroom, coming from a long-time teacher. He's very personable, and so he's fun. He's fun to work with. I say he's commissioner. It's fun for me to work with as well.
And it's a joy sometimes to listen to him. His experiences.
Pinpoint what we've done well, connectivity to all the schools and districts, what the students have created with technology available. Show these are not my responses. These are your all's responses that were at this summit, by the way, but they could have been mine. Then make the argument for the next steps, get the right people to STLP. Most superintendents do not understand the overall cost of running technology organization. They don't grasp the total cost of ownership and are only concerned when things don't work.
Amen. Amen.
Trying to educate myself.
Yeah. But I think that is common. And so what can we all do? It's just not the districts and the department as well, is make sure, as I said, for our board, I guess I didn't say, I talked to you guys earlier, is for part of this presentation I have to do once a year to our state board, I lay out all the funding sources that are needed to address the technology unmet need. And I talk about we don't have part of this funded and the impacts of not funding that. But I lay out all the different funding sources that are available and how really the KETS funds, while we're trying to raise it, is not a huge portion of that. It does count on a lot of other funding sources within a district to address it, to be successful. So part of that is, I think that's an important message that to get out there. All agreed to create a staffing formula for education technology positions similar to other district positions. So Randy Poe, Superintendent, Boone County, says he has a formula to fill positions for everything except technology. When you have X number of buses, you need X number of positions. He says this one does not have it. And it really needs that in order for that to happen. And what I did find interesting, and I don't know who the facilitator of this table was, is people had not made the connection of the stuff that we just talked about with the staffing related to this. This is the same. We talked about the funding that's needed, where the staffing positions that are needed, and it's closely tied to the funding. So they do go hand in hand. Would be nice if all of us could write letters to some of our local legislators and the Kentucky Society for Technology Education, could do some boilerplate for CIOs to pull from. Once again, the STLP was another big thing at this table. So using social media campaigns that reach your parents. I think that's the other aspect of this, is just not legislators and superintendents, but also having the community understanding it. Because I think the multiple voices, obviously I will educate, legislators the best I can, and folks know anything from me for the past 25 years. I will do that. I will follow through on that. But I will tell you other voices, and, a new legislator, that impacts you. Just not coming from me. Of course, I'm going to say the state needs it. But I would say 95% of the success will not be me, although I'll try my best. I would say 95% is you all talking to legislators and your superintendents, but also the community members talking about why this is important. as they're weighing it. Not that it's going to be a big deal, but at least they're weighing the plus and minuses of that from the different perspectives. So I believe that's an important one. In Harrison County, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I'll say here, in Harrison County, each month a group of students presents to the board and the District of Education on something they are doing with technology. They set up prior to the meeting the one-on-one for meet and greet community members. and newspaper were also there. Another good way to look at how you market, the positive things you're doing. Once again, superintendents may not have an idea of actual cost to run the TEP program. Here's the real budget, and here's the CETS portion of that budget. Mike, another part is the TAR report. They talk about really needing the TAR report, but it's not the sole basis of it, of the need for that. Need a shock effect of the amount of funding needed to maintain, this is table 6, to maintain the technology environment, which they represent as a 3-5% of the total budget. One CIO met one-on-one with their district legislators in a previous session, which appeared to be beneficial in creating awareness of the education technology funding program. Each need an EdTech half-pager of the big EdTech impact on K-12 and how it ties into the new high-priority initiatives, test scores, and results if funding isn't restored. Have conversations within the program areas and just not a separate technology conversation. So this is amongst your peers, your chief academic officers, on why this is important. So that also comes from them on what they're trying to do academically, why this is important within the organization. Must tie it back to the people side of thing was another comment. Lots of the STLP thing is just over and over again, getting the superintendents aware of the total cost of ownership. Here's another one. Great working relationship with the finance officers who can advocate. So that's another position within the district of educating the chief academic officer, but working on the chief financial officer. So even if you're not a direct report to the superintendent, typically the finance officers are. And if you can convince the finance officer, I know in the Department of Education, I worked so hard to have a good relationship with those two positions. I would go out of my way to have a good relationship with our chief academic officer and chief financial officer. I typically meet with them once every month, a one-on-one, just separate, an hour to kind of go over things, make sure we're in sync, and that's above and beyond what what all of us are doing. But I found that that's really paid off by doing that. Our leaders were not educated with digital tools and resources. Remove the jargon and bring efforts together in a single voice. We need to highlight what we can do and what we cannot do. Take hard data to the legislature, number and facts. So this is the digital readiness report that we do every January, that we get your feedback, and we definitely will use that just like we use this year. The technology activity report, your all's feedback report, are all things that I use in the legislative session. So those 3 items, when I ask for your feedback, were the top 5 things we did well, didn't do well, your goals, and I've read those off here, is I take those in totality. That gives me a good feel I'm on target with the things that we did well and didn't do well and should work on. And the TAR report tells me your all's finances, and we're trying to get that coding any better so it's more accurate. And the digital readiness report tells us the actual things that you have. I combine all those together and I submit them to the legislators. So that will be part of our package, but you'll need a local package as well that you're working on within your district. We need to educate education technology leaders, and those are folks in your all's positions and technicians, on the history of the CETS baseline, to prepare so they're prepared to speak to the superintendent. Since a majority of folks in these positions have not been around since the inception of CETS, like I have, Harold and Mike, Bob, Dee Dee's been part of it in and out in different capacities. I agree. Is we do need to educate them. It was once 19.5, it's 16.4. Here's what we were able to do. And the impact of that fluctuation on the CETS offer assistance and the shared services that we're offering. Also talk about the loss of federal funding that it's had has only amplified the funding constraints. So, Mike, I'm assuming that discussion is around where E-rate no longer pays like for phone systems. Right. I think that's what you all are meaning, but does that sound right?
With E-rate is really, the change in E-rate has really affected my district. I mean, we've always been at 90% discount, and we really depend on as far as the networking and some other things. And with the phone service, matter of fact,
we had
this discussion. Yeah, it's a major change for us. We've got to back up and punt, I guess, so to speak.
It's that expense that we weren't counting on having to come up with, and speaking with our finance officer a couple months ago, we were talking in general. I was just asking him about this facility here, how much utilities am I out over the year, and he brought up about the phone service and the internet, and telling me the different cost that I was paying this year versus years past, and it was astronomical. It really impacts a small district,
right,
when you're talking thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah.
in difference.
Yeah.
And obviously, part of that conversation is we've got to continue to look at how we take advantage of opportunities of doing phone system and communication services differently than we've done in the past.
Right. And we're limited where we're at. We don't have a lot of options like in doing the big city, so to speak. So, we're kind of at the liberty of, of who the providers.
Yep.
And as Mr. Blaine has mentioned, it's difficult in the mountains sometimes to get the fiber there, and so rates are higher. Our internet compared to other places is, probably if someone came out of Lexington to here and said, you pay that for internet, they would, well, we're tickled to death to have it.
Yeah,
the
voice service changes and the E-rates impacted everybody. Obviously, nationally, that's been a big impact on everybody as far as the way that's changed. But it's something we're continuing to work on and look at going forward. How do we make sure that we create these opportunities and that we understand what these opportunities are to provide voice services in a different way that can take advantage of new technologies and new things that are available. Obviously, there's challenges depending on where you're at, like you're saying. But it is something we got to continue to try to overcome because it's a setback that everybody kind of had to feel and deal with in an unfortunate situation. I guess the other side of that, part of the reason that was done, and I'm not advocating for it being the right thing or the wrong thing, but part of the reason that was done was to preserve the primary purpose of the E-rate program, was to provide connectivity to the classroom, and to be able to do that at a national level and reach all schools across the United States. Now, you could get into the whole debate about how all that works and everything, and again, but I guess the way I'm trying to look at it is, if some of these changes wouldn't have occurred, would have it put the whole program in jeopardy? We certainly wouldn't want the whole program in jeopardy because there's advantages that are continuing to be available to us. But again, you got to get into a whole conversation of dissecting that and debating that and so forth. And absolutely a recognized challenge for everybody.
This is from Table 9. Districts also need to prepare and demonstrate student usage, impact, and tie to student achievement as materials that are routinely provided to local board members and legislative representation. Furthermore, having students share local success stories with local and state leaders is critical. Also like this one, tie it to football. Speak how the money impacts Wi-Fi and cell service. But it's things like that. I mean, they're trying to take it just not technical, talk about basic things that folks are doing, and it impacts it. The other part is, must educate superintendent. Superintendent's best chance is Table 13. The superintendent is best to bring this up to the legislator because some folks in your position say, I don't really talk with legislators, but these positions typically do, and I understand that, but we have other districts that don't do that. But we understand that the superintendents have other things on their mind too, so they may mention that for 5 seconds and some other things for 30 seconds, and so trying to address that. And also, this comment, there's a lot of new legislators, and so we need to circle back to educate them. We got one right here. Now he's educated and on board. But we do have a lot of new legislators that we need to educate on this. So if you've done it in the past, you need to circle back to a new legislator and educate them on the entire process. Our next step with this will be, as we do with all the feedback, is we will show you all the detailed results, but then Lisa Moore on our staff is doing a summary and highlights of those. And so there's two ways that she does that, just to remind you. She's going to find the common themes that we see throughout this. But also, even if I see one thing mentioned, it didn't have to be mentioned 1,000 times. Sometimes that one idea that someone came up with is worth mentioning that as a major item. And so it's really looking through the lens of both of those. And I've highlighted both of these. So Lisa, you're going to see the ones I underlined as I thought, and they may not be common theme, but I thought, man, that's really powerful stuff that I just saw listed there. But once again, I thank you for the district's input to this. It will be used to brief a lot of different people, and hopefully this has been helpful to you. I know this has been helping the conversation here from the different perspectives that we have within the organization. So we'll now move to Dee Dee to give an update on the data side of things.
Okay. Okay, school report card did open this last week, and only the profile page is up. Most of our districts, or all of our districts, did updates and verified data, so we thank you for that. I think at the end we only had 17 schools that weren't updated, so I mean that's pretty good. So the information on the school report card should be as you want it to be. If it's not, the DACs have been communicated with. They have information on who to contact for different things. If your pictures aren't right on your school, if you got a new school, the picture we didn't verify that, so that might be something you need to update. Local board members or school council members, those type of things are things that you still want to look at and verify. We did get that information from data stewards for the applicable area, but it still might need to be tweaked. So if it is, this is the time to do it. It gives us an opportunity for 6 months to really get this landing page good for you before it goes public with all the rest of the data. How that goes public with the rest of the data this year, it's going to look a little different. We're expecting some type of dashboard. Have you all heard about dashboards? I'm looking at all the folks over here that are saying yes. So there'll be some type of dashboard. If you've been doing the town hall meetings, you've seen the dials that are being proposed right now. That information, it'll probably be one page. It's not going to be drillable. It's not going to be what you think sometimes of a dashboard, being drillable and all that. It's going to be pretty basic this first year. So, expect some changes. That will more than likely be your landing page, and then you'll go off to the old school report card. Our intent is to replace the school report card for 17-18. There's a number of reasons for doing that. One of them is the fact that it's reached end of life. We had some struggles with performance of it last year, as well as with the Every Student Succeeds Act. We've really got to make some changes with some new data collections and the new accountability model. So there's a number of reasons that we need to make some changes to the school report card. So we have the intent of doing that for this next year. We do have cloud migration still going on. We've got a couple districts that are going in May, but we're to the point now that we have only 41 remaining districts, and we're still progressing well. There's been a couple little things that have come up, but things that we were able to overcome very quickly. So, it's been very successful due to a lot of hard work of a lot of people at the district level, as well as Infinite Campus and at the state level, to make sure that things were thought through well. So we appreciate all that. Civil rights data collection, I think information went out to superintendents yesterday. We're still only have about 70 districts that have completely verified and certified their data. This is not a state data collection. This is a federal data collection. The state, somehow we thought it was a good idea to help you with that, and I think that's been very well received, and we're glad to be able to do that type of thing. But we can't certify the data for you. That is something that you have to do yourself. So, I'm hopeful that a lot of people have looked at, they just haven't hit that final button that says certified. But remember, that's got to happen before April 26th. A couple training opportunities coming up. I'll just mention, and remember that our training opportunities are posted on the CASES training page. But we've got some end-of-year training that's going to happen April 27th and 28th. And that's typical. We do the 3 trainings a year. That'll be through WebEx. And then webcast, I should say. And then the SQL reporting services that's happening by Infinite Campus is offering in Owensboro April the 20th and 21st. And if you've not had the opportunity to really get into the back end of Infinite Campus and do some data pulls and things like that and would like to, this might be a real good opportunity for you. That's it.
Any questions from our studio audience? By the way, do we have any questions that Bo Button Go Soapbox or themes that would be a good time to address?
There wasn't a question as much as, I guess it is a question, but there was a question about, can talking points for the legislatures be shared with districts soon? So that's just a comment that's made, comment about being able to provide those talking points out.
Yeah. And it is key. You can't wait, as you know, Representative Blanton, during the session because you're busy. It requires time ahead of time to talk with them. So yes, we need to get those out way before that January time frame, and we will. But we'll jointly work on those. That's not going to be a KD thing in isolation. We'll go back and forth with districts on here. We think are the big points, because they'll be not just points using for legislators, but as boards I'm going to be using with the state board and Mr. Pruitt. Mike, let's transition over to planning and project management.
Yeah, the only couple things I just need to mention were reminders outside of things we've already talked about. offers. Hopefully folks are getting their third offers. I'm going to look at the crowd over there. Has any of you all gotten your third offers? I'm seeing some heads nodding yes. If anybody's nodding no,
So
don't
just
hesitate.
we send money, this CATS money we've been talking about, there are offers of assistance that we send to districts. And so part of how this E-rate works is when we pay for high-speed services, we get part of that money back, and then we send that back out to districts, which they match and they can buy technology with. So typically, these third offers are from the money we get back from our high-speed network through E-rate that we send back out.
Exactly, very good point. We do 3 rounds of offers, are what we're doing right now. And currently, this year, we've done 3 rounds of offers for a total of $21 per student. The third offer ended up being able to be $5, which again is primarily, almost I would say 100% actually made up of those E-rate refunds coming back from where we pay for the high-speed network and get those refunds back and then redistribute those out to the school districts, which is a great way to be able to work those dollars. And we've talked about that many, many times. So I don't have projections for next year's offers yet. I know people will be asking that question, and I'm definitely hesitant in saying what I think they're yet or what we think, but we'll certainly be keeping that in mind as we go forward. It'll be part of what we have to present to the state board. So it'll definitely happen over the next month pretty much, that we'll have those numbers about what we'll be projecting for the next year. The other reminder I want to make is on E-rate filing. May 11th is the window closing for E-rate filing for the upcoming fiscal year. So definitely make sure you're on top of that if you need assistance. Obviously our regional engineers are available to direct you or provide some assistance on how to make sure you're in that game, because we all have to continue to be in the E-rate game, and I call it a game just simply because it's so interesting and fun to operate within sometimes. But it's certainly not a game. It is something that's very critical and important to how we're able to fund all the things we've got to be able to do.
Mike, usually in the May webcast, we give our proposal of what we're going to use for the CATS unmet need and expenditure plan. So that's when you'll see it, and we'll get your feedback from that. So typically that's the venue that we use that. So you'll see that up on the screen next time. That's our financial strategy for the next school year.
Right. The only other thing I had, David, which you already mentioned, was the work we're doing on the human capital and a tool and a way that we can have that visually available. And I know you mentioned earlier that that's going to be an effort to go out and talk to superintendents and so forth. So that is a continued effort. We're wanting to make that. We're wanting to from what was shared with during the CIO summit, we're wanting to improve and enhance that to where it has some interactive capability to where people can. From their district's perspective, they can say, well, these are the things that represent my district. Now, how does that influence these proposed numbers of staffing that we need and things that are needed in order to maintain the technology program in your district? So that's some continued work we're doing.
We're going to move on to our Chief Information Security Officer, Bob Hackworth. You going to scare us today, Bob?
Well, David, I only have a couple of things to talk about today, and I think everyone will agree that the fewer things I have to talk about, the better, and the happier everyone will be, as a matter of fact. So August 31 is creeping ever so much closer, and everyone probably understands what I'm getting at here. We have a question on Go Soapbox about this topic, but Kentucky has some relatively new still data security and breach laws that went into effect back in 2014, 2015. And as a result of one of those, House Bill 5, we call it House Bill 5, another law also came into effect, 701 KAR 1:170. And that's all about a couple of different things, but the reason I'm bringing it up today is by August 31, KDE and every local school district is supposed to report to their local boards, that they have reviewed the data breach and security best practice guide, and that they understand how well or not so well their various data systems are being protected. And not every data system has to be protected equally. For example, if you have a data system that has all sorts of student data in it, if it has all sorts of social security numbers, person identifiable information, that top secret data that you have in your district, that probably deserves a lot of protection, a lot of security around it. Whereas if you just have a data system that has some email addresses and a few other things, then that very likely does not require as much data security. And so what we're trying to do here by August 31st is understand where our important data are, how well they're protected, if we need additional protections or security around those data systems, and then to make sure that our boards of education understand that information. And it's also very important as you're identifying and relating this to your board, it's probably a good practice to not do this too publicly. You know, you don't really want to give hackers and anyone else who's out there the knowledge of exactly what's protecting your systems. And so you'd want to do this behind closed doors, or be able to tell them, we reviewed it and we believe everything's okay, but if you have questions, then let's do that privately, and which is very, very permissible
and the reason
appropriate.
We use this technique is, and I'll go through this, and we have some new folks here. At my house, I can put 30 locks on the front door, put bars on every window, barbed wire everywhere, and that really is added security, but I've made it so cumbersome no one wants to live in my house. And so there's a balance between security, and sometimes it's not needed. It's massive overkill. So part of this is, just the amount of risk that you want to accept within a district. It may be, yes, it's a 1% of 1% risk, and they could get, to a loaf of bread. You're willing to accept that risk. Because it would cost $3 million a year to keep that loaf of bread from being stolen. So there is a balance between all this. And so part of the reason we want the superintendent to do with their board is so when something does go bad, they said, well, I told you ahead of time this was a potential risk. It cost $5 million a year to do that. We didn't do it. So this is what happens. So it's that discussion ahead of time. And it's just part of an educational event.
Absolutely educational and awareness. If you don't know where the data are, and as we went down this road, we discovered so many more data systems than even we had been informed about at the department. Now, not a lot of them had super important data in them, but it was kind of interesting to find out where a lot of those were, and that's what I've also heard back from a lot of districts, that it's they're saying that, well, we didn't really know we had data until we went through this exercise. And so at this point, you've probably already completed the heavy lifting. That was last year. That was the first time we had to do this. Now this should be more of a revision. Just take the data you've already found, make sure it's revised, make sure it's updated, and then move forward with that.
And in the spirit of eating my own dog food or drinking my own champagne, is I do the same thing with our board. Because I just didn't want to say, districts, you have to do it, and not have to do it ourselves. So I have to do the same thing through our commissioner and our board. So we go through the same kind of exercise.
Now I was looking at the Go Soapbox question, and when I first looked at it this morning, and that's when I entered in my yes, it's in the works vote for KDE, it was kind of neck and neck. The not yets began to pull away, but now we've kind of closed back to almost even, which I'm very excited about. So I'm very happy to see that we're at least almost even. If anyone has any questions about this sort of thing, obviously you guys know how you can get in touch with me if you want more information about this or maybe some pointers, that sort of thing, so feel free to do that. If there aren't any specific questions about this, I would move on to my next thing.
Yes, please.
Okay. The next thing, number 2, is I'm kind of going to channel Phil Coleman here as best I can. It's regarding the very appropriate increased awareness being placed on Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, especially for websites. And I think that that's something that we've all been a little more aware of here in the past
So what is
several
that?
months.
What is 508?
Well, this is...
Y'all know what 508 is?
To make sure that our websites and really any material that we provide are accessible to folks who may have different abilities than we have. They may be sight impaired. They may not be able to read the website the same way we would read it. They may have to have a different way to consume that information. And so what we have become aware of is some free webinars from the U.S. Access Board, and they're hosting these free webinars beginning on May 30th and then running every other month. And these webinars, and they have been really keyed in on the differences in the updates to this Section 508 law. And there have been some recent updates to that, and I think we all probably need to be as aware of those as we can. So they're starting in May. They're going to be going every other month through November. It's usually towards the end of the month. And we're going to be sending out some communications both to superintendents and to CIOs, giving them more specific information about the dates and then what will be discussed on each one of those dates. And so I highly encourage everyone to take advantage of those.
And this, while it's the right thing to do anyway, this came about because of there's a lady in Michigan that was looking at websites. And she first of all started out with like major state government websites, and then she's gone to very large districts, sometimes smaller ones, and said they're not meeting the basic 508 compliance. And so we've talked about this in previous webcasts, the software that she's using, that you can see if your site is accessible. Because if it's not, then it goes through a whole process here, and the Department of Education is going through a process for their own website. So this is just to circle that back, because I know we have people coming and going to earlier topics we've had on this. So I guess we can send that out to the field staff, and the field staff will inform you all of when that when that is. Bob, I have a question. I'm always interested in sharing, not necessarily by district, but learning from other districts and other organizations when something happens. So I call it can happen to you, as you know. What are the most common breaches that you've seen in the past 12 years, 12 months?
Well,
we'll go to 12 months in K-12, because the law required those now to be reported. So what is a common theme that you've seen?
And I actually can go back 12 years. I won't necessarily today,
Good.
but the most common ones that we have been seeing here in the past couple of years have been as a result of accidents with email, people sending the wrong information to the wrong person. For instance, here in Eastern Kentucky, there are a lot more Hackworths than there are in any place else in the state.
Great.
Grew up in Eastern Kentucky myself. And there is a Bobby Hackworth, who is very likely not watching this webcast, but he gets a lot of my email accidentally. People send it to Bob Hackworth, and they just type it in Bob Hackworth, and instead of getting to me, it goes to Bobby Hackworth in Prestonsburg. Luckily, nothing really bad has gone to Bobby, but I think he's probably set up his own folder, and all my stuff just goes in there. And so that's probably the most common way, is we will just type someone's name in and send something via email, and it'll go there. And that we don't get many of those. I'm not saying that this is a huge, the sky is falling problem, but that's one of the most common ways. The next common way has been phishing, actually, and we've had a lot of
Not the
phishing
fun
attempts.
phishing.
Not the fun phishing, which is I used to do a lot of that here in Eastern Kentucky as well. But the very unfun phishing, where you get an email that pretends to be from someone else. Generally, it is the superintendent here recently because of tax time, and the superintendent, quote unquote, will be saying, I've got to have this information. Usually it's something like W-2 information or all the financial information for the district. Just send it to me at my iPhone. And when someone hits reply, if they're paying attention, they'll notice it's not going back to the superintendent. It's going to some other email. And so we have not really been hit with that, but we have spent a lot of time, and a lot of folks have spent a lot of time throughout every district being on guard for that.
Well, there's been lots of attempts.
There's been a lot
but
of
through
attempts.
the educational effort and getting this on the radar screen of superintendents and chief financial officers, we've not had an incident.
Exactly, but I think that this has been such a huge issue last year and this year that we have probably spent a lot more time on this than we have on some other things that have actually caused data breaches. And then the third thing has really been laptops that have been left in cars and have been crimes of opportunity, where someone will just walk by a car, see a laptop in the back seat, either open up the door if the car is unlocked, or just easily break through a window, reach in and grab it, and then take it somewhere and usually sell the device itself.
I had breakfast yesterday morning with a guy that's scarier than you about security. And he talked about a technique I never really thought about, of people just intentionally dropping thumb drives on the ground in parking
Exactly.
lots and hoping you will pick those up and put them inside your computer, because it is
Yeah, it's an attractive thing. Everyone, a thumb drive.
free thumb drive.
Free thumb drive, and I can put all my photos on it and share them with my family, and before you know it, the malware that was on that thumb drive has infected your machine, your family's machine, and all that sort of stuff. So if you find thumb drives on the ground, leave them be. It's sort of like if you find a used
them in the
toothbrush.
trash.
Yeah, if you find a used toothbrush, don't pick it up thinking, wow, what a deal. It's not.
Kind of related to this as we close out is the next webcast and give some thought, is there's this balance of security. And Bob, we've talked about, I think Jody Rose had this discussion with his team and his CIOs in far western Kentucky. For kindergartner through third grade students, there's this balance between you make them go, each one, remember our long username and password, and you spend 20 minutes of your instructional time trying to get them all going. Or you use another technique. Maybe you have one username and password and you log them all in, and there's this balance of security, and from the teacher's point of view, you've made it so cumbersome, they can't have the students do that. So one of the talking points that we're not today that I want to see, I'm interested across the state, how are you handling kindergartner through third graders? Typically, that age group is not accessing top secret information, much like as they get older. So what are the strategies that we have to balance this so we don't have kindergartner teachers, first, second, and third grade teachers struggling with this? So I'm interested in your all's input as we go down this path. The one technical item, I'm going to channel Phil Coleman as I close out here. Phil is actually at the Lightspeed Advisory Group meeting out of state. He's trying to get input of how other states and other large districts and districts in general are implementing their internet content management system that we have here in Kentucky. Version 3.2.1 is now available in general availability, but we recommend that we wait until the summertime to upgrade that. Part of it is we want to see how this plays out with other sites that have implemented it. So if there's problems with it, it's corrected before we put that in place. Is there any other things that bubbled up that we need to hit on before we close out here? Okay.
Well, David, I would like to say if there's another security guy that scares you more than me, then I need to up my game.
We'll keep you, Bob. He was too scary. Magoffin County, thank you for being our host, and Region 8, thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you being
here. Yeah, thank you. All right. We'll see you all next month. Take care.